So the first thing you do is obviously go to gravit.io. And when you get to gravit.io, you're going to hit start now. And it may ask you to log in. And if you do, I use my Google account to log in. And then you'll get to the area where you're ready to create your very first project. You're going to choose New Design. But before you hit Create, change the units to something that's going to work for you. I know a lot of people like to think in inches, so I'm going to change my units to inches. And I'm going to want a canvas that is fairly small, so maybe I'm going to start with a 5 by 5 inch canvas, and I'm going to hit Create. And that brings me to an area that's about 5 by 5 inches into a toolbar. And we'll talk a little bit about the toolbars and all the different tools as we need them. I'm going to have you notice that the canvas here is 5 by 5 inches. And when I click on it, I can tell here on the right, it says page 1, that the width is 5 inches and the height is 5 inches. If I decided that that was the wrong width or height, I could definitely change it here and make it 4 by 4, but 5 by 5 seems like a great place to start for creating an ornament. And I'm getting ready to start creating my ornament, or badge, or sun catcher. It's up to you. Because it's close to the holidays, I'm going to call this an ornament. My ornament is going to be a circle shape. So one of the things you'll notice is along the top, there are different tools, and one of them is the shape tool. I'm going to go down to the shape tool, and I'm going to pick an ellipsis, and I'm going to drag my cursor down, and I'm going to draw an ellipsis. But one of the things you may notice is that I might draw it, and it may not be more like an oval than a circle. If you wanted a straight circle, you'd be better off, let me delete that one, to hold the shift key down while you're drawing. So let me go back and pick ellipsis, but this time I'm going to hold the shift key down, and notice that it draws it in proportion. The height and the width are the same. There's my very first shape. I'm going to use the arrow keys to move it up a little bit. And notice on the side, I've got the position, X and Y axis, but I also have the width and the height. So let's just say that I wanted this to be 3.5, and I knew that I wanted it to be 3.5 inches. I could also change the width and the height manually using the settings in this navigational on the right. So now I have a 3.5 by 3.5 circle. One thing I want you to notice is when you hover over it, a little red border appears. And that lets me know where the border of my circle is. We'll talk a little bit more about the fill and other pieces in a little while. The next thing I would like is one more circle. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. You could go and hit ellipsis and create another ellipsis. Or I could click on it and hit edit and duplicate. And that was going to create the exact same circle. Notice I have two circles now. I'll just drag one. And I want the other circle, the second circle, to be a little bit smaller. So I could eyeball it and drag it till it's the size that I want. Or I could come over on the right-hand side and say the first one was 3.5. I want this one to be 2.5. Height and width. Oops, I have 2.9. I could tell that wasn't quite right. 2.5. So now I have 2 circles. I'm going to go over here and save it. File, save. And down the bottom here, I will have, I'm going to call this Holiday Ornament. Simple. It's going to be a fairly simple ornament. Okay, so take a look at the fact that we have 2 circles here. 1, 2. 1, 2. And every time we hover over them, I can see the outline. To make it a little easier to work with, one of the things I like to do is to color my shapes and then remove the cover when I no longer need it to help tell where my shapes really are. So for example, I'm going to choose the smaller circle. I'm going to select the smallest circle and I'm going to come over here where it says fill, and instead of having it be gray, I'm going to click on the gray and maybe I'll pick yellow. Now my smallest circle is yellow. It does not have a border, but its fill is yellow. Now I'm going to pick my larger circle and I'm going to click on fill and I'm going to make it be orange. Makes it a little easier to tell where your circles are without having to hover over them every time. Then we're going to remove the color later. So now the next thing I'd like to do is to align these. So the smallest circle is inside the bigger circle and perfectly in the middle. I could eyeball it, but I'm not as precise as the computer for doing this. So we're going to use these tools on the top over here. They are called align left, align center, align right, align top, align middle, and align bottom. What we want to do is select 2 shapes. I'm going to select one and hold shift down to select the other. And then I'm going to come over here and hit align center. Now notice both shapes are aligned in the center, but we also want them aligned in the middle. So I'm going to click the both still selected. I'm going to click this and I'm going to choose align middle. Now both shapes are aligned perfectly across the middle and the center. So we've aligned both shapes, and now what I'd like to do is to cut the middle out of this shape. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to click on, select the middle shape and the top shape, and I'm holding shift. And I'm going to show you one other feature that's very helpful. And this feature, it looks like 2 boxes, and it allows you to subtract, intersect, do differences, or merge 2 shapes. In this case, I would like to subtract the area of the lower shape from the object. So when I click subtract, that shape is gone, and now we really only have one shape. Now, I am going to undo both of this because I want to call your attention to something on the left-hand side that's going to come in really handy. So we're going to go back to where we were, and we're going to select the yellow shape. That's the smallest circle. On the left-hand side, you're going to see layers, and they're both called ellipses. That's not very helpful. I'm going to pick one, and notice the bottom one is the bigger shape. Then I'm going to pick the other one. Now I've selected the smaller yellow shape. I'm going to rename this right now. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to call it yellow smaller circle. Now I'm going to click on the other shape, and this time I'm not actually clicking on the shape, I'm clicking on the layer, and it selects the shape, and I'm going to name it Orange Outer Circle. And that's going to help as we're moving things around. Okay, what I'd like to do is to cut the yellow circle out of the orange circle. So I'm going to select both shapes. I can hold Shift. Notice they're both selected on the left-hand side. And when I come over to our tool that allows us to do this, now I'm going to come to Subtract. I'm going to click Subtract. And now the yellow shape is gone. The one that was laying on the top is gone. Notice that this has now been renamed Compound Shape. If I did the drop down arrow, I could see that this compound shape is made out of a yellow smaller circle and an orange outer circle. I like to rename my shapes, so I'm going to name this. I'm going to keep compound there to remind me that it's a compound shape, but now I'm going to call it Orange Ring. All right, we need another circle. I want a hole so that I could run a ribbon or some wire or some type of hook. And therefore, I'm going to go back to my circle. Make sure that I've selected the shape tool. And I'm going to create a small ribbon hole. It's a small circle. And so to make sure that it's really even, I am going to go over here and maybe make it 0.25 by 0.25. Now I have a nice little hole here for the ribbon, and notice on the left-hand side, it's called ellipsis. I could call it my ribbon hole. That will help me understand what that hole is and why it's there. Now remember that that hole might not be perfectly centered, but I do have some tools that can help me with that. If I select the ribbon hole and I select the orange ring, I can come over here, and this time I don't want to put it in the middle because it would come down here. Let me undo that. What I really want is just to center those two, align center. Now they're perfectly aligned, but they're still two different circles. So what I think I'd like to do is to cut that ribbon hole out of the orange ring. We're going to repeat these steps. We're going to choose the orange ring and the ribbon hole. Notice that they're both selected on the left-hand side. They're selected here because I dragged them. I could have held Shift. And now I want to, you guessed it, subtract. Now I'm back to compound shapes. It renamed it, and it's the ribbon hole and the yellow circle, but it's all been compounded into one shape. So I'm going to call this Ornament Base. My ornament base is made out of a ribbon hole, a yellow smaller circle, an orange outer circle. Looks pretty good. Let's take a break.